Shalom and welcome to this edition of Revealing the Truth, where we cover the headlines, the heartlines, and biblical truth. I'm your host, the Reverend Rabbi Eric Walker, and it is our distinct honor and privilege to bring you today's special guest, Pamela Geller, author of the book Fatwa, Hunted in America. Pamela, welcome to Revealing the Truth.
Thank you for having me, Rabbi.
Your resume, your background are without question going back to what provoked you from 9/11 to you entering really into the public eye with the caricature competition in Garland, Texas, where an attempt on your life was thwarted. And yet, during that time, when the official position was Pamela Geller is an enemy of the State of Islam, when this became public in the Islamic world, the American world was not stirred. The American world did not wake up. As a matter of fact, it seemed as if we all took Ambien and went to sleep while this entire episode and attack came into your life, which is why today the story of this fatwa, this contract on your life, must be told. Walk us back to the genesis of all of this and where this began, because something changed in you that caused you to become, in modern terms, not a zealot, but someone who is in the highest regard for your passion and your vision and the cause in which you stand, which is America, take the blinders off your eyes, because it's coming. It's not only coming, it's already here, and you've missed it. But let me be a living example. Let me be the Susan B. Anthony. Let me be the Rosa Parks. And that's exactly the light I put you in, as someone who is willing to put themselves out there at personal risk and danger. How did all this begin?
Well, I wrote the book Fatwa, Hunted in America, and for your listeners who may not be aware, a fatwa is a legal ruling by a recognized authority under Islam. It is a death bounty. It is a death sentence. And in the wake of a number of fatwas, the most serious one, the Islamic State, there were a number of assassination attempts. You mentioned Garland. There were others. Last week, the leader of a Muslim plot to behead me was convicted on all charges, all terror charges, and he faces life. But the media blamed me. This war is very complicated. It's not simply the enemy of the global jihad. And it is interesting how I got here, because previous to 9/11, I was apolitical, quintessential New York City career girl who loved her fashion, her music, theater, books, her art. I was the publisher of the New York Observer. As I said, I was apolitical. I felt that the good cop was on the world beat, that evil had been defeated in World War II, and that my freedom was like the air I would breathe. It was absolute. I never for one moment questioned my freedom or thought that anything could threaten my freedom. That never even entered my mind. And then, of course, 9/11 happened, and it shook me. I mean, as those buildings came down, so did the very nature of my thinking. My premise was false, you see. And so I felt guilty. I didn't know who had attacked the country. And then when I found out who had attacked the country, I felt guilty that I didn't understand the ideology. So I read the Quran, and I read the world scholars of Islam, Ibn Waraq, Bachayor, and increasingly found myself online, because the media was just not talking about this. They were either willfully blind, clueless, or complicit. Didn't matter. The fact was, you were not getting any of this information from the systems we would come to go to for our information. And increasingly, I found myself online, and I would comment on counter jihad blogs, and someone sent me a template for a blog and said, stop blogging. And I'm like, what's blogging? And they're like, shut up and start writing. And that's really how the work began. First the study, a period of study for years, and then the writing at Atlas Shrugs. which is now Geller Report. It's the same thing. I just made a Geller Report easier to find because, of course, the media would never say what my website was. God forbid people should go there, you know. And all the activism that you saw, whether it was the Ground Zero Mosque, which was a 16-story monstrosity in a building that was destroyed in the 9/11 attacks. When it was first announced in November 2009, I did take umbrage to the idea that they would put a mega mosque in a building that was destroyed in the 9/11 attacks. And having studied Islamic history, I knew that there was never a mosque of reconciliation and healing ever constructed at the site of a jihad attack or jihad conquest. But there have literally been tens of thousands, probably more, mosques, supremacist mosques, triumphal mosques on the sites of jihad conquest. And so I led the opposition to this monstrosity. And we won. It was a long fight. It was a hard fight. The president at the time, President Obama, supported it, staunchly stood behind it, made his announcement in support of it at the iftar dinner at the White House. Mayor Bloomberg, who was the New York City mayor at the time, supported it. His office helped the mosque developers fill out the paperwork, all of the city paperwork. Even though they said it wasn't at Ground Zero, even though it was in a building destroyed at Ground Zero, they said, you know, the developers, just to show how deceitful the whole narrative was, they said it wasn't at Ground Zero, and yet they applied for 9/11 redevelopment funds. Again, this is something the media would never report. The media decidedly wanted this mosque, and we beat these enormous forces, the White House, City Hall, and the largest weapon the enemy has in their media, in their arsenal, which is the media. And so this book is the story, my story, of how I got here, how I'm living under 24-hour death threat, requiring 24-hour security, the fact that there is a fatwa on my head. And while it is my story, Rabbi, the fact is, what happened to me is what happens to every American in small and large ways who engages in this fight, who stands in defense of freedom, which is why it's critical, it's required reading for every American who loves their freedom, who wants to preserve this nation. The idea that I am somehow controversial, no. Truth is controversial. Standing in opposition to jihad terror is controversial. And this is the era in which we're living in. It is a freedom of speech issue. Freedom of speech is the foundation of a free society. And without it, a tyrant can wreak havoc unopposed while his opponents are silenced. And the idea of being offended, you know, we have to deal with this hair trigger sensibility in the Muslim world. Well, I'm sorry, but putting up with being offended is essential in a pluralistic society in which people differ on basic truths. If a group will not bear being offended without resorting to violence, then that group will rule unopposed while everyone else lives in fear of that violent group, while other groups will curtail their activities to appease the violent group. This results in the violent group being able to tyrannize the others, which is what we're seeing now. And this idea that it is Islamophobia, excuse me, but this term amounts to little more than the enforcement of sharia in the marketplace of ideas. The concept of Islamophobia is, the idea that we are not allowed to examine the ideological roots of jihad terror. Anything that addresses this issue is called Islamophobia. But you see, Rabbi, the word is used to intimidate people into thinking there's something wrong with opposing jihad terror. And this deforms our response to terrorism by placing off limits the examination of its guiding ideology and effectively enforces Sharia blasphemy laws in the U.S. by placing Islam, by placing the Quran, by placing Muhammad beyond criticism. And I refuse that. I will tell you that right now. I am not a Muslim. I do not live under Islamic law, and I will not abridge my freedoms so as not to, offend devout savages.
You know, over the course of history, we've watched ideologies advance And one of the ideologies which you expose is intellectual sharia. Most people are distracted by sharia being a law which limits women's rights, laws which govern the activities of a Muslim within a Muslim community. But intellectual sharia is now the control of my mind, of my thought process, and my ability to articulate my position and my opposition to the advancement of the Islamic ideology. And excuse me, because that control is now being exerted by the media, there is an intellectual sharia going on right now, an intellectual jihad going on right now, which says if I can control the mind as Adolf Hitler did, if I can control the mind as Mao Zedong did, if I control the mind as Muhammad did, then I ultimately will get the body to line up with the mind, and I will control the people. And that's the underlying agenda of what we're seeing in America today, is that this fatwa that's on your life, this idea that it is an offense to heaven to draw a caricature of an individual. Let me assure you that my grandparents, your great-grandparents, we have had more caricatures of ourselves painted on the walls of Poland, on the walls of Hungary, and the walls of Russia, in the walls of Germany, and the walls of New York City than any people group in the history of mankind, and we represent the smallest minority of humanity. And yes, of course, it's offensive and we don't like it, but yet we press on and we do not require everyone to conform to our way of thinking and our way of life, and an intellectual identity forfeiture that is what is being promoted, that everyone must think the same, and the thinking of the same is is intellectual sharia, which is even a more grievous offense than the physical no-go zone. It's now taking the individual mind and saying the individual mind is now a no-go zone. And you've taken a stand against this, and it's a lot of pushback because mainstream media is looking at this and saying she's attacking the entire infrastructure, our ability to frame American thinking, which is the underlying agenda of media. And you're opposed to the advancement of the media influencing the underlying thought process of Americans into accepting Islamic Sharia and the advancement of intellectual jihad.
It's Sharia. I mean, that's what it is. It's Sharia. It is Islamic law. In Muslim countries, if you blaspheme, if you offend or criticize Islam, even if it's true, slander under Islam is not like slander in Western law. It doesn't matter if it's true. If it is offensive or insults Muslims or you depict Muhammad, it is punishable by death, which is why there are numerous fatwas and why I'm living under a death threat. But here in the West, what the left does, because there is this leftist Islamic alliance and the media is decidedly leftist,
yes,
they assassinate your character. They murder your good name. They make it impossible for you to make a living. They make a monster out of you. That's how they kill you. It is a form of murder to ruin someone's good name. I mean, the idea that speech that is offensive must be curtailed is absurd. First of all, who decides? Who decides what's good and what's forbidden? The government? ISIS? Antifa? The media? Speech that is offensive must be protected. If speech that offends a group is outlawed, then that group has absolute power, and a free society is destroyed. A group that cannot be criticized cannot be opposed. It can work its will no matter what it is, and no one will be able to say anything to stop it. As far as the caricature, and we'll discuss that event because I'd like to go into it a little bit, I didn't make cartoons a flashpoint. The jihadis did.
right.
I didn't make the cartoons a flashpoint in the discussion about free speech because according to Islamic law, they're blasphemy and they're punishable by death, and many have been killed over them. At issue is whether we will protect those who draw a cartoon and show it, and thereby protect free speech and society, or we censor ourselves and others over them, and thereby we, in effect, adopt Sharia law. Now, for those that say that I was being provocative in Texas, I'd like to give you, Rabbi, a little background information. In the wake of the Charlie Hebdo slaughter, Charlie Hebdo was a French magazine, a Paris weekly, an irreverent magazine who basically insults everybody. They don't have a particular foe. They insult Christianity, they insult Judaism, they insult the government, they insult everybody. It's sort of like a Mad magazine a la France. But because they ran a cartoon of Muhammad, there was a fatwa on their head. And these fatwas, these death sentences in the Islamic world, know no borders and have no expiration date. You look at Salman Rushdie, the British writer. His fatwa was issued in 1989, and it's still as much alive today as it is then. He's living under constant 24-hour security, except the British government under Thatcher was good enough to provide him with security. President Obama did no such thing. President Obama didn't even mention the war on free speech he was an enemy of, and subtly, supported the Sharia. Look, a week after the Benghazi attacks, Obama went before the world at the UN and said, "The future does not belong to those who slander the Prophet of Islam." Now, those are the words of a Muslim leader in a Muslim country. Those are not the words of a president of the United States. So this idea, there was a fatwa issued on Charlie Hebdo, the French Paris weekly, and they were slaughtered en masse by devout Muslims, editors, writers, cartoonists. 3 days after the Hebdo slaughter, Muslim leaders in this country gathered in Garland, Texas to hold a conference, not in support of freedom of speech. That would have been a gorgeous moment for American Muslims, wouldn't it? Send a message to the world. No. They held a conference in support of the Sharia, in support of the ideology behind that slaughter, in support of the slaughter. American Muslim leaders held a Stand with the Prophet conference in support of Sharia against quote-unquote Islamophobia, which is a term, which is a euphemism for Sharia.
Right.
And I decided to hold a conference in that same room, in that same venue, in that same city, in support of the freedom of speech. I had an art exhibit showing Muhammad depicted in art and literature over the past 1,400 years. The point was to show that people weren't always being killed, that it is that the violent intimidation of Western people in the West, it's being used to impose Sharia in the West, and we weren't going to stand for it. And so I had this conference. I invited artists, sketch artists, cartoonists to enter into an art competition. And of course, it's ironic that the winner of our competition was a former Muslim who grew up in a Muslim home and was well aware of the extreme and brutal ideology of the Sharia. And of course, one knows what happened then. It became quite international because devout Muslims opened fire on our event. And because I had security, because I know what I'm dealing with, my SWAT team took out those jihadists. What is deeply disturbing about this incident is that we found out 15 months later in an indictment in North Carolina of an ISIS recruiter that the FBI was in on the planet. There were texts entered into evidence in this indictment of Eric Jamal Hendricks, an ISIS recruiter. There were texts entered into evidence between the FBI agent, undercover, and the jihadists planning the attack. So they knew about it. And then we find out that they were there. They were at my event. They were texting Ibrahim Simpson and Nadia Sufi, texting them. The jihadists were asking how many people are there? Is the FBI there? How many police are there? We did not see what the FBI responded. The responses were not in the indictment. But I can tell you this, 60 Minutes did a piece on the fact that the FBI was in the car behind the jihadists. The FBI got out of the car. When the jihadists got out of the car, the FBI took cell phone footage of the jihadists. And when the jihadists started firing, the FBI got into their car and drove away. They were actually pulled over by law enforcement because law enforcement thought that they were part of the attack. What is so stunning Not that they were in on the planning. The left went crazy with that. Daily Beast wrote, look, he said, tear up Texas. It's entrapment. As if someone said to you or me, tear up New York, and I would go and get a machine gun and start killing people. No, that's not what bothered me. What bothered me is they didn't warn us, they didn't alert us, and they had no one there to protect us. They knew that there were jihadis coming to kill us with guns, automatic weapons. They didn't tell us. What did they want to happen? What did they expect to happen? And then, of course, this week we find out from Judicial Watch that former FBI Director Mueller had partnered with terror-tied groups, unindicted co-conspirators in the largest terrorist funding trial in our nation's history, the Holy Land Foundation trial. They partnered with terror groups, CAIR and ISNA, Islamic Society of North America, to purge FBI counterterrorism materials of Islam, jihad, and Sharia. So is it surprising? But people don't know how our agencies have been compromised. This is why I wrote the book. People don't know the FBI knew about the jihad plot. They don't know that they were there. They don't know that they did nothing. And people really need to get armed in the information battle space. They've been disarmed. And I tell you that this is where the war is now. All the bullets and the bombs and the bloodshed comes as a result of what happens in this war. And even today we find out, Newsweek broke the story, in this other plot to behead me out of Boston, that it was communications between the plotters to behead me, Dawood Wright and Usama Rahim, between them and the Islamic State, leaders of the Islamic State. Those communications led to the killing of Junaid Hussain, who was the leading cyber terrorist, cyber propaganda terrorist for the Islamic State. There's much people are not being told. People are not being told, for example, with the Garland jihad, the Texas jihad, that jihad cell had been meeting and plotting and training for a year. They had cased the Super Bowl. They had looked at major malls, soft targets in this country. They were plotting to kill Americans. And then they settled on my event. Had my event not taken place, Americans would be dead today. Media never tells you about that. They blame me. I was provoking Muslims. By what? By living as a free American in America? Yeah. That's why people need, it should be required reading. You should get Fatwa for Hanukkah. You should get Fatwa for Christmas. No greater gift will be given to you, because this will give you the key to unlock the door, to see what is going on right under your nose. It's like the American people are like Helen Keller and someone moved their furniture. They do not know what's going on, and it's happening. It's happening. I have parents write me every day. My children are learning the Shahada in the public school. They're learning the 5 pillars of Islam. There's a chapter on Muhammad. What do I do? And I teach people what to do. To go in and start saying that Islam is evil or what, you're going to be labeled a racist, Islamophobic, anti-Muslim bigot. If they are teaching Islam in your children's school, if they are teaching your child the Shahada, if they are, and they are, if you don't know about it, your kid is in the 7th grade in middle school and you don't know about this, you're not paying attention. They're teaching them the 5 pillars of Islam. There's a chapter on Muhammad. You have got to calmly go into the school and say, this is a violation of the Establishment Clause. If you are going to teach the Shahada, you are going to teach the Lord's Prayer. You are going to teach the Shema Yisrael. If you're going to have a chapter on Muhammad, you are going to have a chapter on Jesus. You are going to have a chapter on Moses. Abraham too, while you're at it. And if you're going to teach the 5 pillars of Islam, you're going to have to start teaching Judeo-Christian teachings. Equal time, because it is a violation of the Establishment Clause. They should not be teaching any of this in the public schools. I understand how they're teaching it under the guise of world history. This is Islamic history. Well, Rabbi, if they were teaching world history, they were teaching Islamic history under the guise of social studies, world history. They don't touch the 1,400 years of jihadi wars, land appropriations, cultural annihilations, and enslavements, let alone the 1,400-year jihad against the Jews and the Dhimma, the non-Muslims in Muslim countries, the oppression, subjugation, and slaughter. Hundreds of millions, 100 million Hindus alone. I mean, so really we have our work cut out for us. No one is going to save you. No one. You are going to save you. And I don't care that you're not wearing a uniform. You are our soldiers. Were the people in the World Trade Center wearing a uniform? The stockbrokers, waiters, waitresses, moms, dads, sisters, brothers, were they wearing our uniforms? Were they our soldiers? Were they our fighters? Yeah, that's this war. It's not like every other war. It's not going to be over in 1945. There is no end date on this war. But I can tell you that if you do nothing, we are defeated. When Muhammad Atta, the ringleader of the 9/11 jihad terrorist attacks, when on the plane headed toward the World Trade Center, he said to the passengers on that plane, "Stay quiet and you'll be okay." That's exactly what they're telling us now. Stay quiet and you'll be okay. You'll be okay. And I am here to tell you, Rabbi, stay quiet and you will not be okay.
I completely agree with you. We're talking with Pamela Geller, author of the book Fatwa, Hunted in America. It is absolutely required reading for every single American. We're going to take a short break, and when we come back, I'm going to have a conversation with Pamela about the Council on American Islamic Relations, this facade, this organization which has penetrated and permeated American corporations and government at the highest level, the Muslim Brotherhood's presence in the United States from the day they assembled in the White House in 1952, with Dwight Eisenhower welcoming 128 representatives of the Muslim Brotherhood into the White House. To this very day, America has changed, and this is one of the fundamental reasons why. You want to know about the country you live in, you need to know who's running the country and what the agenda is. Exposed in the book Fatwa, and will be exposed even further when we come back from break with Pamela Geller. We'll be right back. Shalom. I'm the Reverend Rabbi Eric Walker, Executive Director of Igniting a Nation and host of the daily TV program Revealing the Truth, seen live every Monday through Friday from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. Central Standard Time at www.ianbn.com, and then replayed throughout the day and night via our website. All of our segments can be seen on the Igniting a Nation YouTube channel. Since our launch in January of this year, we've expanded our global reach to over 54 countries with a social media following of over 125,000. Our commitment is to bring you the most in-depth interviews with authors, subject matter experts, and thought leaders from around the world. We have interviewed guests from Israel, Brazil, England, India, and all across North America. All of our authors are featured on the Books and Media page on our website, www.ianbn.com. There you can find a direct link to the book you want to order, and we receive a small commission directly from Amazon. There is no cost to you for this service. In addition to our daily teachings and interviews, we make available to you the archive of all of the interviews on our YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram channels. Our live program is available from our homepage, and there is never a charge to you for any of this access. We made the decision long ago that we would remain a commercial-free resource that would not be influenced by any pressure from any outside company. There are only two ways that we are able to continue to operate this ministry and provide you with the only live 4-hour daily Christian television talk show program. The first is through your support and tax-deductible contributions to Igniting a Nation. These can be made directly through the donate button on the website or sent through the mail to Igniting a Nation, 2700 Corporate Drive, Suite 120, Birmingham, Alabama, 35242. The other way we support the program is by offering you a unique opportunity to have access to over 10 years worth of teachings on a subscription basis. The teaching archives contains all of my prior sermons, Torah studies, prophecy in the news videos, and much more for the low subscription price of $5 per month. This subscription grants you unlimited access to over 800 hours of content not available elsewhere, and is updated weekly with the most current prophecy classes. In addition to 20 hours of original TV programming each weekday, we invite you to join us live every Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday evenings for our Prophecy in the News classes. The times and locations are listed on our events page on the website, www.ianbn.com. Every day, you and I are faced with the challenge of where we will go to hear the truth. We are committed to bring you the only program of its kind that covers the headlines, the heartlines, and biblical truth. We cannot do this without your support. Since we launched on January 5th, 2017, we have aired over 300 individual teachings, interviews, and commentaries not available anywhere else. We are now working side by side with almost every major Christian publishing house to bring you the most in-depth feature interviews possible. Our one-hour features address every subject that affects the believer's life. We are hearing of salvations from the Middle East, Africa, and all across the United States. Lives are being changed every day, and we have only just begun. Our mission is to become your trusted resource and grant you access to the people, tools, and information you need to grow in your relationship with the Lord. You can help us by liking us on social media and through your financial support. We know you have many choices in who you support, but we are prayerfully asking you to consider helping us keep revealing the truth, true to our calling, to cover the headlines, the heartlines, and biblical truth like no other program available. Donate today and help us bring the message to the four corners of the earth. Visit www.ianbn.com and donate, buy a book, or subscribe to our teaching archives. Without you, we do not exist.
Sure.
Shalom and welcome back to this edition of Revealing the Truth, where we bring you the headlines, the heartlines, and biblical truth. I'm your host, the Reverend Rabbi Eric Walker, and we're talking with Pamela Geller, author of the newly released book, Fatwa, 100 in America. Pamela, welcome back to the program.
Thank you for having me, Rabbi.
Again, I tell you that you have my personal esteem and admiration. I have watched as you have stood firmly in the face of every kind of attack, personal, professional, spiritual, legal, political, from every aspect of the media. You have a friend in us. I know you have a friend in Sean Hannity. You have a friend with those who are willing to tell the truth. That's all we care about. I'm not looking to adulterate the truth. I'm looking to reveal the truth. That's the name of our program. And in revealing the truth, I take you back to the day, the episode in San Bernardino, California, where within 2 hours of the time of the event, the brother-in-law of the perpetrator of that event was brought before a microphone and a camera crew led by the Texas representative of the Council on American Islamic Relations, who was feeding information to a brother-in-law who was testifying to the fact that this was the nicest, most wonderful, sweetest, most caring young man, and it was virtually impossible. It was inconceivable for him to have even been implicated in this event whatsoever, that there was no indication of any kind whatsoever. Now, the power of an organization to command media attention within 2 hours of a massacre was so stunning to me that I said, I personally have got to investigate how they were able to control the media. How deep does this go? How widespread is this? And how many parts of America are impacted by this Islamic agenda? And the results were staggering to me. At the CEOs of corporations, of the heads of state, of those who are actively in our government in appointed positions, who actually run the government. 97% of government is appointed, only 3% is elected. And we have those who have a commitment to the agenda of the Muslim Brotherhood, of CAIR, the advancement of Islam, of the westernization, of taking over the West through immigration, jihad by immigration, and by this intellectual jihad, this intellectual sharia that is being imposed upon every American, that says that you cannot speak out and be a target. This program is a target. I am a target, and I am proud to be a target, and I'm proud to stand next to you as a target in this battle. You have taken on and exposed CAIR and the Muslim Brotherhood in many different ways. Share with our audience some of the stunning revelations that you have found in exposing this diabolical infiltration into the fiber, the fabric of America that began in the 20s and 30s. This is not a new initiative. This has been going on for a long time.
Yes, it has. You know, in a rational world, the Council of American Islamic Relations would be as marginalized as the Ku Klux Klan, as opposed to being portrayed by the media as sort of the Martin Luther King of Muslim advocacy groups. They are the go-to group after every jihad attack. I mean, could you imagine every time there was a Nazi attack that you would go to Himmler or you would go to Goebbels for comment? And I don't mean in a bad way, I mean in a good way. The Council of American Islamic Relations was named firstly as an unindicted co-conspirator in the Hamas trial of the Holy Land Foundation here in Texas. And CAIR was listed among the, quote, entities and members of the U.S. Muslim Brotherhood's Palestine Committee. That committee, prosecutors said, was created to advance the Hamas agenda within the United States. And when CAIR tried to remove its name from that list, prosecutors said that such relief would prevent it from its conspiratorial involvement with the Holy Land Foundation and others affiliated with Hamas. Half of CAIR's leadership has been convicted of jihad terror-related crimes. And just to show you just how deeply they have infiltrated, not just in San Bernardino, which is a perfect example, but remember, a week after 9/11, President Bush went to the mosque in Virginia with CAIR and other Muslim Brotherhood groups like ISNA, the Islamic Society of North America, and said that Islam is a religion of peace. That doesn't happen by accident. Things just don't happen. Things are made to happen. How did they get that far? They had been working, as you point out, here for decades. You know, there was literally a mountain of evidence that came out of the Holy Land Foundation trial that was moved to the Department of Justice. And what was supposed to happen was that these groups, CAIR, ISNA, Muslim Student Association, was supposed to be prosecuted. There's a mountain of evidence, mounds of eavesdropped conversation transcripts, intercepted communications and internal documents. And you know what? Eric Holder and President Obama scuttled those prosecutions. I am not surprised because that administration really was aligned with the jihad force. What does trouble me that I see no activity on it from Sessions, from Attorney General Jeff Sessions. This is a subversive group who was working to undermine the government, working to undermine our freedoms. This is a very dangerous subversive group. I understand that they are lauded by the media, much the way Black Lives Matter is as well. I mean, or Antifa, another violent subversive group. They're all part of the same axis of evil. But the idea that CAIR is consistently consulted after every terrorist attack. We're not consulted. You know, the FBI Director Mueller didn't consult with my organization, American Freedom Defense Initiative, or John Guandolo, or Steve Emerson, the investigative terrorism project, to purge. And when he was purging counterterrorism materials, it's like he went to Al-Qaeda. You know, I mean, really, it's the same thing. The two CAIR founders, and that includes Nihad Awad, who joined President Bush at that mosque, participated in secret meetings of Hamas members and their sympathizers. This is back in 1993. And one of the meetings held at the Philadelphia Marriott focused on Hamas's opposition to any Israeli peace agreement. They oppose a peaceful two-state solution to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. And of course, they also discussed life and politics and the memorandum, the Muslim Brotherhood Strategic Memorandum, which is the objective is to destroy Western civilization from within by its own hand. I mean, so yes, Omar Ahmed and Nihad Awad, the two founders, were present at that secret Philadelphia meeting. Now, why do I say this? Because none of this is ever referenced when every major media outlet goes to CAIR and calls them the civil rights, the Muslim advocacy group. Now, when I'm described, it's always ad hominem attacks. It's always anti-Muslim, anti-Muslim. I help Muslim girls in this country get to safe places. Muslim girls who don't want to wear the hijab. Muslim girls who live in devout households and live under penalty of violence and death. Girls like Amina and Sarah Saeed, who we couldn't help because they were honor killed. Aqsa Parvez, Noor al-Maliki, Jessica Mokdad. On the other hand, Muslims have filed lawsuits against CAIR because CAIR is really interested in one thing, and not helping Muslims. They are interested in advancing their agenda. As a matter of fact, my legal team, the American Freedom Law Center, is represented many Muslims in lawsuits against CAIR. So I strongly recommend that people look up the leaders of CAIR, Musa Abu Marzouk, who was the deputy political chief of Hamas. I mean, these people are inextricably tied to terror groups, and why they are in such a position of enormous influence should deeply disturb every American.
When Phil Haney came out of the Department of Homeland Security, I think you know Phil, and he talked about how he observed that terrorist data was being removed from the Department of Homeland Security database. I wouldn't be surprised if this shooter on Saturday, on this past Sunday in Texas, if when they do their Air Force investigation, don't find that maybe he was entered, but he was removed, that there is this plot which is going on. Now, John Guandola and I have talked about understanding the threat. David Galbitz and I have talked about infiltrating and going through this. You and I are having this conversation, but there's few of us. And it seems that if we, the few, are not as vocal as we can possibly be, that people are being lulled in this false sense of security that our government is a safe haven. It is a swamp, and at the bottom of the swamp are secrets and our bodies and our things that once exposed are going to blow the lid off of this. But unfortunately, it seems that there is some blockage, that there is a deeper state, that there is something going on that is prohibiting. Yes,
Can I
please.
say something? The church massacre is horrific, unquestionably. And the left-wing CNN supporting mental patient who did it should not have been able to buy a gun. I do think that was a mistake made by a lax, and let's be honest, under President Obama, the military did not have its finest hour. Let's be completely frank. It was not a priority. He slashed and crashed their budgets. He imposed a Sharia compliant agenda. Not that Sharia compliance has anything to do with this case, but I just think that it was the idea that they weren't alerted. They did not pass on that information, which by law they're supposed to, enabled him to buy the gun. I can tell you this, if he was a right-wing Fox News watcher, because we know that from his Facebook page, it would have been all over the news. Facebook fan, a Fox News fan, murder, church, it would have been on their resume till they died, Fox News. But nobody's talking about that it was CNN. This is what they do. This is what I mean by how dangerous and evil. But I do believe in the case of Vegas that there is a lot that we're not being told. I don't think Islam is responsible for all the evil in the world, okay? I do think that the church shooting in Texas was horrible, could have been avoided. This man should never have been able to get a gun. I don't think guns are the problem. If not for the law-abiding gun owner that killed him, there would have been even more dead. So that's a ridiculous argument that the left just wants to disarm. They just want to disarm, law-abiding citizens. Vegas, on the other hand, is deeply problematic. You have the Islamic State taking credit for it. They never take credit for events that are not theirs. They didn't take credit for the church. That should have been a natural. It's a church. They Stephen Paddock went to the Middle East multiple times. You never hear about those trips. Where did he go? What was his itinerary? Not one reporter asked about it at those press conferences. Over 200 of his transactions, his foreign financial transactions, were flagged for possible covert terrorism financing. Not one reporter ever asked about that. And something I saw the Islamic State do that they never do. They doubled and tripled down. They said he had converted 6 months ago. They gave his Islamic name. And as I said, every time they've taken credit for an event, even when the media said it wasn't them and it was opportunistic, it was them. The jetliner in the Sinai that went down, they took credit. Law enforcement said it wasn't them. Weeks later, they furnished proof of the bomb. And then, of course, law enforcement had to backpedal with their tail between their legs. This past summer in June in the Philippines, a casino, Resorts World, brutal attack. ISIS took credit for it. Law enforcement said, no, it's a robbery. Nothing was robbed. Turns out, not only was it ISIS sanctioned, but it may very well have been directed by ISIS. So that's deeply troubling because that was really horrific as well. Terrible attack. And if we're not safe in the homeland, we're safer even less if we cannot trust those who we elect and who our elected officials put in place to protect us. Vegas is a deeply, deeply disturbing story. There's a blackout on it. Sure. There's no news on it. I guess the media, the obsessed, radical, extremist media, are still talking about Charleston, really, which was an aberration by, a group, Richard Spencer, who has no following. Who bigified Richard Spencer? Some marginal Nazi. Are there a couple Nazis left? Yeah. Are they a movement that are going to destroy us? No. Who bigified Richard Spencer? The media. Nobody would know who he was. Another smelly little boy in his basement. Nobody would know. And there's even talk that he's funded by Soros. But the media needs that foil because it's a bogus narrative that doesn't exist. And so they keep talking about it. But nobody's talking about Vegas. And that speaks volumes.
It does. I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but I do know that deep within our government are those that are blocking information. It is my hope that this Uranium One, it's my hope that this Clinton Foundation, it's my hope that the Mueller-Comey investigation goes deep enough to identify who those are that are blocking information, because the information's there. You and I both know people that have access to classified information, knowing that the information is there, but they're being blocked from getting access to that information. The lid has to be blown off. I believe in my heart of hearts that your book, Fatwa, is going to be the spark which lights the fire under Americans to say, you know what? We've read the story now of Pamela Geller and what she's been put through and how the government has been complicit in subjecting her to these kind of attacks and standing with the attacker and not standing with you. And if this can happen to you, and it happens to me, and it happens to others that take a stand and who are vocal, who are putting ourselves under physical attack, emotional attack, spiritual attack, we can never be a soft target. We must be vocal, we must be profound, and we must be passionate about this. We have to encourage Americans that America belongs to the Americans. It does not belong to the Council on American Islamic Relations. It does not belong to Hamas. It does not belong to Hezbollah. It does not belong to ISIS. It belongs to the Americans. And this idea of giving non-citizens constitutional rights is not a part of America. My family came to this country. Your family came to this country. And we abided by the laws of this land and agreed to uphold them. When the representative from the Council on American Islamic Relations states on national television that Sharia law is higher than the Constitution of the United States, and there was not an outcry that the streets of America were not filled with protesters running out of their homes, waving the American flag and saying, no, we will not stand for that. You cannot claim that you are in these borders and that your religious or ideological book given to somebody by a fictitious character in a fictitious setting 1,400 years ago is establishing a law which is higher than what my ancestors and your ancestors and others' ancestors gave their lives for. Okay, we're not going to tolerate it, but there was no outcry. It is my hope and prayer that Fatwa, and that I pray over this book, that this book will penetrate the hearts of the people, that this will take those who've been lulled into a false sense of security, that they're not looking at this as a conspiracy theory. This is a true story of a woman of valor who stood up and said, I will not be a victim of an ideology that says that I don't even matter, that I don't exist, I have no rights, I am not a person, I am less than human. And the fact that we are Jewish, the fact that you are a woman, the fact that you have taken a stand and have been outspoken has made you a target. But let me assure you that this is the target America needs to focus on, and that this target that's been used by the enemy to fire at you will now be a target of people's intellectual focus, that they will target their minds to understanding the story that you're unfolding here in this book, and it will grab a hold of them because it is a compelling story of fact, not fiction. This actually happened. These events took place. Unless you, Pamela Geller, had been the voice, there would be a mosque right there at the Twin Towers. This was an initiative that you took hold of, and it's time that people understood that America was swinging that way. And had that happen, America would have swung fully that way. Saudi Arabia's presence in America is profound, is the largest funder of the building of mosques. Yes. And the condition under which they build mosques is that if you build a Saudi Arabian funded mosque, you must take a Saudi Arabian imam who is going to teach violence in America, and you're not welcome in that door. We don't allow reporters inside mosques. Listen, I'm happy to have you come hear my sermon. They're all over the internet.
Absolutely.
But you cannot find a sermon from a mosque because that's private, that's sacred. Pamela Geller, I am honored and proud to have you tell this story, and I thank you for being bold enough not just to do what you did, but to do what you're doing and to put this story out there as a wake-up call to America that says if you have a few dollars to give a gift this Christmas, this Hanukkah, this Thanksgiving, this birthday, this anniversary, and you have your choice of any gift to give, this is the gift to give. It will be life-changing, not just for you, but for your children, for your grandchildren, and for the future of America, because America is headed down a path of destruction. We are the target. We are the last nation to fall, and the westernization and the focus on jihad through immigration and migration and the focus on America is now the entire focus. It's laser focused now on the West because Europe has fallen. Africa has fallen. Asia has fallen. We are the last vestige, and you are the voice that's carrying the message forward. Pamela Geller, I cannot thank you enough. An honor, a privilege to have you here on Revealing the Truth, where you have fulfilled our mission, our vision to reveal the truth through this book, Fatwa. Thank you so much for being with us here on Revealing the Truth.
Bless you, and thank you for having me. And yes, it is the gift of truth. It is the gift of freedom for Christmas or Hanukkah or whatever holiday. It really should be required reading because, as you said, it's a true story. There's conspiracy theory and there's conspiracy fact. That's conspiracy fact.
Well, God bless you for everything you're doing, and may the Lord bless all the works of your hands.
Please get the book. Support the workers. They won't have us in the bookstores. It's just been a real difficulty getting the word out. You know, this is not a message that the elites want you to get. It's just that simple. But I do think, as you said, it is shocking. It will open your eyes, and I don't think you'll be the same after reading it.
Tell me the websites they can find you on to support both the book and all the initiatives that are going on with Pamela Geller.
You can clearly get the book at Amazon or Barnes & Noble online, or you can go to fatwabook.org. My website, which is a news site, which I update every day with news the media will not cover, the jihad across Europe, the jihad across the Middle East. That's GellerReport.com or PamelaGeller.com. Subscribe. You get one email a day with all the headlines, which you won't see anywhere else, and it's free. And of course, please follow me on Twitter at Pamela Geller, on Facebook at Pamela Geller. I have 1 million followers who share, link, and email my stories. That's your job. Your job in all this is not just to take, but to give. And you have to share. We have to build an army of Davids to go up against this Goliath, this evil Goliath, this leftist Islamic enormous machine. But we know how that worked out with David and Goliath. So we'll win as long as you get active. Thank you again.
Amen. Thank you so much. And that brings to an end our live broadcast day, but that does not mean we go off the air. We broadcast 24 hours a day, 7 days a week in every time zone across the world. We've been live right now in prime time in the Middle East, hearing the message about Fatwa. We'll be prime time later on in the United States, all throughout the country. You can watch our programs on WND TV, as well as on the web at Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, as well as www.inbn.com. We thank you, Pamela Geller, for being with us, and we will be back here tomorrow morning live in studio at 9 a.m. Central Standard Time with another lineup of great guests. Until we see you right back here tomorrow, we bid you shalom.